Hello, it's Marc.Westra here. This is Half Brother number 18, part number 2. We headed down past the Empress, got ice cream, and walked around the inner harbor, looking at the boats and craft stands, listening to the buskers. With an aching intensity, I wished I were here with Jennifer. So, what do you think of this new guy your dad's bringing in? Peter asked. I turned to him in surprise. What guy? He didn't tell you? This hotshot linguist from Berkeley, Greg Jaworski. Now that I wasn't going to the weekly meetings anymore, I wasn't that on top of the Project Zan anymore. Everything I learned was from Mum and Dad over the dinner table, or more often from Peter. Where's Berkeley? I asked. I'd heard Dad talk about it, but I couldn't remember. California. He's going to make sure Zan's learning language properly. We sat down on a bench and looked back at the ivy-colored Empress. I don't get it. We all know Zan's learning language properly. What do we need this guy for? Well, your dad's not technically a linguistics expert, so I think Godwin put some pressure on him to bring one aboard. It was strange, thinking of someone telling my father what to do. To me, Dad always seemed like the guy who knew everything and gave the orders. Other people scrambled. It was especially uncomfortable to imagine him being bossed around by David's father. It's probably good for the project, Peter said. You know, its credibility and everything. There's a lot of linguists who don't even think ASL is a proper language. Really? Yeah, but Jaworski does, and he's big. So with 2 experts heading up Project Zan, it looks pretty hot. I don't think your dad was crazy about sharing credit, but it's not like he has a lot of choices right now. What do you mean, choices? Just that he's got to make the project work here. There aren't too many universities who would sponsor something like this. He must have seen the confusion on my face. Teaching chimps sign language is not something most big universities would like to take seriously. It's pretty far out. U of T wouldn't touch it. Harvard and MIT probably wouldn't either. How would you know? I said. But I remember Dad grumbling about how U of T wouldn't get a chimp for him. I thought it was because the university was stupid, not because the whole idea of the project was crazy. Anyway, I added defensively, Dad just got another grant a couple of weeks ago. It was only a small one, apparently, not like the biggie he was still hoping for, but it would help. And now Dad seemed more relaxed. I know, said Peter. Look, I think it's totally radical and groundbreaking, and it's good news for everyone, Jaworski joining the project. It's bound to win that big grant, and it might open up some US funding too. That's good, I said. As long as the project kept going, Zan would be safe. He'd stay part of the family. August 5th had been marked on my calendar all summer, and when it finally arrived, I wanted to call Jennifer that very afternoon, but didn't. They'd be tired from their trip back. The next day, I thought about calling, but decided I'd look too eager. Play it cool. When I called the day after, there was no answer, and I lost my nerve and didn't call again. Next morning, the phone rang, and Mum answered and called out that it was for me. My heart was pounding. I was hoping it was Jennifer. It was David. Bonjour, Benjamin, he said. You speak French now, I see. I speak many languages now, he replied. How was your trip? He grunted. It was okay. Kind of boring. So you want to go to the beach? A bunch of us are going. And yes, that includes my little sister. Sounds good, I said. Thanks for the postcards. No problem. We'll swing by and get you around 10:30. The beach. Fantastic. Just like last summer. I'd made sure to get tanned over July so my chest and legs didn't look all pasty. I put on my bathing suit and stood in front of the mirror for a while, checking out how I looked from different angles. When the Godwin station wagon pulled into the driveway, I could see it was full of just guys. Cal was driving, and another one of his hairy rugby friends was in the front, shirtless, looking muscular. David was in the back with Hugh. The girls are coming in a different car, David explained as I got in. Jane's older sister is driving. Jane's coming? I moaned. David screwed his face up into his best Jane impersonation. What's your problem, Ben? God! She scares me, said Hugh. She's crazy about you though, man, David said to me. It's obvious. You're kidding me. The only thing obvious was that she hated me and loved seeing me squirm. Jennifer told me, Tarzan. I nodded, hoping David would keep going and tell me Jennifer was crazy about me too. But he didn't. Is Kelly coming? I asked Hugh. Ah, Kelly, 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 said Hugh. We split up. What happened? I asked. She didn't like Gilligan's Island, he said. David snorted, like he knew something I didn't. But Hugh didn't say anything else, and I wasn't going to be a pain and ask more questions, so I let it drop. We drove all the way out to Willows Beach in Oak Bay. I'd never been there before. There was a field and a playground and a snack bar that was pumping out the smell of French fries and vinegar. The beach was nice and long, and the tide was way out, so there were lots of sand. Across the water was a little island, and beyond that, you could see the mountains rising up on the American side, snow-capped. The girls were already there, lying side by side on their towels, Jennifer in the middle, looking at a photo album. I sucked in my breath as we drew closer. My entire focus was on Jennifer. She was wearing short shorts and a halter top and these really glam sunglasses. All morning, I'd wondered how she'd greet me. Throwing herself into my arms and kissing me crazily was my first choice, but unlikely, I thought, especially in public. She wasn't getting up from her towel, so I just said, "Hey, welcome back." "Thanks," she said. "Did you get the shades in Europe?" I asked. "Paris," she said. "Pretty fab, huh?" "Very Bridget Bardot," I said, which seemed to please her. "So are these your pictures from Europe?" "No, Ben," said Jane. "They're her pictures from Disneyland. Duh." I ignored Jane. Then, now that I knew she liked me, suddenly she didn't have as much power. I felt like Superman after the kryptonite had been taken away. "Hey, I want to see those too." No one was exactly shifting to make room, so I plunked myself down in the sand in front of Shannon's towel. The album was kind of upside down, but this was as good as I was going to get. Jane made a big sighing sound. "Ooh, who's that?" Shannon said, pointing at a photo of Jennifer with some guy. "Oh, he was our tour guide in Berlin," said Jennifer. "What a hunk," said Jane. "European guys are really good looking," said Jennifer in this casual way. "And do they ever know how to dress?" I thought he was kind of weaselly, but I didn't say anything because it would seem like sour grapes. I started to worry she'd had some kind of fling with him. Mum sometimes talked about her trip to Europe after high school, and it sounded pretty wild. Crazy romances happened in Europe all the time. Luckily, I didn't see any more pictures of the Berlin tour guide, and I figured it was unlikely Jennifer had had a torrid affair right under her parents' noses. Anyway, according to David, who flopped down beside us with Hugh, they were only in Berlin 24 hours. Jennifer went through the pictures, taking us from country to country. David chipped in with his own funny commentary, sounding like a voiceover from these old newsreels. "Bustling Trafalgar Square in the heart of London. Look at all those tourists feeding the pigeons. Look at all those pigeons crapping all over the tourists. Delightful fun." There were tons of pictures of the Godwin family in front of statues and historic buildings. Lots of pictures of Jennifer looking gorgeous on cobbled streets and on riverbeds and old stone bridges. I didn't like all of these other people getting to see her while I was way over here. By the time the last page of the photo album was turned, I hated the entire continent of Europe and all the well-dressed people in it. Jennifer took off her halter top and shorts, and her bikini was underneath. I tried not to stare. It looked like her breasts had gotten bigger since the last time I'd seen her in a bathing suit, exactly a year ago. And she seemed different, a little more aloof. She'd gone to Europe and gotten all sophisticated and Europeanized. She was sandwiched between Shannon and Jane, like they were bodyguards. When she needed lotion on her back, she asked them, not me. I kept hoping she'd wander off meaningfully along the beach and I could walk with her, but she seemed happy gabbing to her friends. A few times I walked down to the water alone and stood looking heroically into the distance, but she never joined me, so I gave up and started throwing the frisbee around with David and Hugh. After a while, the girls came and wanted to join us, so we made teams and started a game of frisbee tag. "Let's see those muscles ripple, Ben," said Jane. I tried to whip the frisbee at her head a couple of times, but kept missing. I noticed that Hugh had no problem making contact with Jennifer, and a couple of times he plowed into her pretty hard. He'd been David's friend for so long, I guess they'd all grown up playing together. I was always worried I was going to nudge her breasts as much as I wanted to, or hurt her, so I was always kind of skimming past her. Once Hugh knocked her right over onto the sand, and when he helped her up, I heard her give a little shriek. "Did you just slap my butt?" she demanded. She didn't seem that upset, and Hugh just ran off with the frisbee. I started looking at Hugh more closely. I'd never thought of him as handsome, but he was a year older than me, and he was big and played rugby on the A team. Did that automatically make him cooler than me? I started thinking backwards, fusing scenes together in my head like some crazy movie flashback. Hugh danced with her at the dance. He talked with her at school and made her laugh sometimes. But I just thought they were pals. David had never mentioned anything about Hugh liking Jennifer, or vice versa. When it came time to go home, I was hoping Jennifer would come back in the station wagon with me, but Jane's older sister had come to pick her up, and Jennifer wanted to go with the other girls. Hugh lived really close to Jane, so he went with them. The day hadn't turned out at all the way I imagined it. Greg Jaworski, the hotshot from Berkeley, showed up in mid-August. He was going to stay in our spare room for 2 weeks, working on Project Zan with Mom and Dad. He was wiry and bearded and smiled a lot. His eyes behind his glasses were just the tiniest bit buggy, and he talked really fast. Everything seemed to excite him. He was excited about meeting Dad and Mom and me, excited about meeting Zan, excited by the hidden cameras, and he was really excited when he watched us signing with Zan for the first time. He used the word fascinating a lot. At first, Zan didn't know what to make of him and hung back, but by the end of the first afternoon, Zan was climbing into his lap and taking off his glasses. He seemed to like Greg, and that made me like him too. "What a fascinating little fellow he is," Greg said. I wasn't sure how Project Jennifer was going, but Project Zan was going to be just fine.